What's up, Coding 2? Mr. Agnos here. In this video, I'm going to show you a faster way to animate than we learned last year. Okay? I don't think I showed you this way last year, and if I did, then this will be review. I'm also going to go over a few things to help you clean up your code and make your code a little more readable. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so I already spent a bunch of time drawing three pictures here that I'm going to make move around the screen. We got our Minecraft Creeper, we got Pikachu, and we got Starfire from Teen Titans Go. One little comment on drawing these. I'm a little rusty. Right? We took some time off. I didn't get a lot of coding in between January and now. So the first character I drew was the Creeper. The second I drew was Pikachu, and the third I drew was Starfire. And I think you can see how as I practiced more and more, just on this one project, I got better. Right? It all started coming back to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this, and I remember that. So the more you practice, the better you're going to be. Right? This is my first character that I drew here, and you know, an hour or so later, I was making Starfire over here. It also helps to have a photo, right? So I pulled up a Google image of these characters in a different window and used that as a template. All right. Before I dive into how to animate, I want to show you some things I've done here with the code. There is a lot of code here, and a lot of times that can be overwhelming. It can be hard to read. For example, if I'm done with Starfire and I don't need to look at her code anymore, then I don't necessarily want it all over the screen. All right. So, also I have I've put text in my code so that it makes it easier to read. Anyone who looks at the code inside this little box here is going to know exactly, hey, I'm looking at the Creeper code, or I'm looking at the code for Pikachu, the code for Starfire. All right. So remember to put text. And when I say text in the code, it means to write it in a way that the computer knows it's not a command. You just use 2 forward slashes and then write whatever you like. So for example, I'll go down here to line 151 and I'll just put 2 forward slashes and say hello. Notice how it turns green. Well, and whereas the background up here is in black. Green is how you know that it's only text. The computer is not going to interpret that as some type of command. And so it's really helpful for you to label things in your code using this text so that, number one, as your projects get longer and longer, you can go back and know, hey, what is it that this line of code does? And then two, if somebody else is reading your code, they know what part of the program they're looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up Starfire's code right here by clicking on the little purple box. And you can see that this is all the code that makes up Starfire. And you can see that next to certain lines of code, I've put text, right? So I know that this one line of code right here, if I want to adjust her left eyebrow, this is the line of code that I need to work with. I got the bangs of her hair, I got her left eye, her right eye. I got a bunch of her eyes here because her eyes are actually have several layers. Eyelashes, mouth, nose, I think you guys get the idea. But I really want to see you do this in your code. It's going to help you, and it's going to help other people, namely me, who have to go and look at your code. Okay, the way that you get this little, I don't know what it's called, but the way you get your code to condense like this is simply by putting a bracket, or I'll undo it. All right, I got all this code. I want to condense it. I just put it in an open bracket. And then whatever I want to condense, I go and I put an end bracket or a close bracket, and then I go back up and this little arrow appears. This means I can view all the code, I click it, and the code gets condensed. And that's really a nice way just to clean up your programs, because between all three of these characters here, I have, well, you can see I have up to 149 lines of code between these three characters. Okay. So if you have more questions on labeling your code or condensing it so it's easier to read, makes your program cleaner, hit me up in the comments or send me an email. But I'm gonna really encourage you guys to do things like this. It makes your program so much easier for you to work with, for me and for other people to read. All right. Excuse me. Smoke. Last year, you guys learned how to animate by creating variables. So we'll look at the creeper. We would create an x variable, and for example, and then we would go through and replace every single x coordinate in this program with the variable plus or minus what I called an offset. Right? We would set the variable at initial value, and then we would add plus or minus to get to the number that we wanted. This is a great method, but you can see it's also incredibly time consuming. So I'm going to show you a way we can do this by only having to use the variable a single time. So anytime you animate, the first thing we know we're going to need a draw function, right? A draw function draws the screen over and over and over again. So you just type in draw equals and it autofills for you. I'm going to go ahead and cut, Control X, and then I'm going to paste Control V so that now all my characters are inside the draw function. I also like to give my little stuff a little space by just hitting enter several times. All right. It's also good to indent. It just makes it, once you're inside a loop or inside a function, it's good to indent. It looks nicer and cleaner. All right. Remember that your background has to be inside the draw function. Otherwise, you get weird smearing effects. In other words, the draw function makes the computer, it's going to run this line of code, then the creeper code, then the Pikachu code, then the Starfire code, and then it's going to go back to the top and run them again, right? And I think it's doing this like, so you can see what my cursor is doing. It's doing this, I think, 24 times per second. And we'll talk about maybe in future videos how you can actually change that. But it's going to run that loop over and over and over again. All right, when you create a variable, you absolutely do not want the variable inside the draw function. Right? We want the variable created outside the draw function because we need it to stay, we need an initial starting value, and we don't want that value to change. All right, I'm going to make, I'll say var x creeper. So this variable is going to control the x position of my creeper. Now, you might be saying, hey, Mr. Agnos, why not just make it var x, and then for Starfire, we can do it a var y, and then for Pikachu, a var z. So I know it's a little more typing. I like to make my variables have a really specific name. As your programs get longer and longer, you're going to need lots and lots of variables. I mean, I've had students that had 20, 30, even more than that variables in their programs. And I've had some in the past who would just use letters and numbers. And it gets really, really confusing, especially for someone who didn't create the program. So, you know, I had one student who, she was amazing, but she would use like AA, AB, AB1, AB2. And to her, it all made sense. But then as a teacher, when I would look at her program, I had no idea what these variables stood for. Anyone reading my program is going to have a pretty good idea that this variable is for the x position of the creeper. So that's my case for using more specific, even if it's longer, names for your variables. So next I'll do var y Starfire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the creeper move only in the x direction. I'm going to make Starfire move only in the y direction. And then I'm going to make Pikachu move diagonally. And since he's going to move diagonally, I need an x and a y. So I'll do var x Pikachu. And I'm going to set that equal to 0. And I'll do a var y Pikachu. And I'll set that equal to 0. Okay. So this variable will make my creeper move in the x direction. This variable will make my Starfire move in the y direction. And these two will make Pikachu move in the x and the y at the same time. Okay. I might require, I'm capped at 15 minutes, so this video might have a part 1 and a part 2. All right. Rather than go through and replace all the x and y coordinates in all 3 characters, what I'm going to do is use some commands that actually, I want to make this clear, it's like we're going to create different layers. So it's like the creeper is going to be on his own layer, and Pikachu is going to be on his own layer, and Starfire is going to be on her own layer. They're going to be on their own canvas, if you will. And so it's going to be like we have 3 canvases stacked on top of each other, and then we're just going to move the whole canvas. Rather than moving every single shape of Starfire, we're just going to move her one canvas that only belongs to her. And the way you do that is by using a command called push matrix. And it looks like this. And pop matrix. And pop matrix goes at the end. So this is for the creeper. All right. Now, you don't see anything different here. Nothing has changed, but what has actually happened is the creeper is now on his own canvas. He's not on the same layer as these other 2. So now I could use one variable just to move his entire layer, and the other characters won't move because they're not on that layer. So I'm going to go through and create a layer for each of my characters. You need a push to start your new layer and a pop matrix to stop your layer. Oh, I have a capital in there. Okay, so what I've just done, again, nothing looks any different, but now each of these 3 characters is on a separate layer. And then we're just going to animate each layer. And the way we do that is by using a command called translate. For those of you in Math 8, you're actually going to learn about translations this year. It doesn't mean translate like from one language to another. Translate in a mathematical sense means to move a shape from one spot to another. So literally if I have a triangle on one side of the screen and I move it to another, we call that a translation. So we're going to use the translate command. So underneath push matrix, and it's really important that you put the translate command in between the push matrix and the pop matrix. If you don't, then the translate command will affect everything that comes after it. If you put it inside the push matrix and the pop matrix, it only affects things in between those 2 commands. So I'm going to hit translate, and it's asking for an X and a Y. It's saying, well, how much do you want to move the creeper to the left or right or up and down? Well, we want to move it left or right by this variable right here, X creeper, right? Because we're actually going to change that value over time. And then we don't want to move it up or down at all. So I'm going to hard code that number at 0. So the creeper is never going to move up or down. It's only going to move left or right. Notice the creeper didn't go anywhere. That's because right now X creeper is set to 0. Well, we're going to change that here in a second. All right, I'm going to go to Pikachu. Same thing, translate. And we want Pikachu, we'll make Pikachu move in the Y direction, and then we'll make, well, no. All right, Pikachu has to move in both. Okay, so for Pikachu, I want to use both variables. So I'm going to go ahead and use X Pikachu for the amount that we're going to translate him left or right. And then I'll use Y Pikachu for the amount we're going to translate him up or down. Again, notice he doesn't move anywhere because both of those variables are set to 0. And then the last person that we're going to move here is Starfire. And we're not going to move her left or right at all. So we're going to put a 0 for how much we'll move her in the X direction, and then a Y Starfire for the Y direction. And again, notice she does not move. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I'm almost out of time on this video, so please keep watching. I'll put a link to Animation 2021 Part 2. See you guys in a second.